You're listening to Online Pet Health Webinar Podcasts with your host, Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealthwebinar.com.
Hey everyone, it's Dr. Megan Kelly here, and you're listening to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast. Today we're going to be doing one of our Behind the Rehab practice, and I have got Christelle Van Wyk from the Cape Animal Physiotherapy. Now, I've been trying to get Christelle to do this podcast for quite a while, and I'm actually here at the Equine Symposium, and I've got her in the library, and we are about to do this podcast. So I'm really glad to actually get her here because she has been in the field for quite a long time, and I really think that she has got a lot of pearls of wisdom to share with all of us. Welcome, Christelle.
Hi, Megan. Nice to finally have a chat.
Christelle, the Behind the Rehab practice is all about just sort of telling us your journey, where you've been, and sort of talking about the struggles that you've had and challenges, and sharing those with us so that all the others that are in the field can actually learn from them. So let's start off with like how you got into the field.
The short version would probably be I wanted to do animal physiotherapy. But at that stage, there wasn't anything available, or there was no way to study. The few physios in South Africa who was working in the field, I think Claire Woomsley and Winks Green, and those people purely went from humans and figured it out on their own. So my sister was doing physiotherapy at Stellenbosch, so I decided, well, I'll go that route, and hopefully by the time I'm finished, something else would have become available. I finished, and by then I moved overseas with my boyfriend at the time to Switzerland. And while I was there, I heard that the Royal Vet College in London had started a postgraduate master's program. So I applied and then started there on the second intake. So I was there for 18 months, 2 years actually, and qualified and gave up my human patients as soon as I could.
So I actually met Christelle doing my practical for CCRP. So do you remember?
Yes,
in
I
Guildford?
remember that.
Yes, at Greyfriars.
Yes.
So when you were working there.
So I qualified while I was working studying. I had to pay for it because it was in pounds and expensive for me. So I worked as a human physio, and I worked south of London, so around Guildford area. So by the time I qualified the animal work, my husband was happy at the time then to move south. So we moved out of London to Guildford, and I set up my practice there. And
so when you moved then back to South Africa, then did you have to sell your practice?
Yes.
Okay.
I had a physio who I trained up and worked for me, and she actually bought my practice from me when I moved. So she worked with me, and I introduced her to all the clients because obviously they don't have to stay with your practice; they can decide on someone else. So by the time I left, that she'd met everyone. Everyone knew I was leaving. They were happy to carry on with her, and that was that. So we made our own. There wasn't really a set way to sell a practice at the time, but we just agreed amongst ourselves and pulled up a contract, and she paid it off actually over time. She didn't buy it out, or she couldn't have paid outright. So I already had moved back to South Africa, and she just kept on monthly installments, I hope. Because I think
that must have been nice. In pounds.
It was nice, yes. Especially at the time, the pound was very strong against the rand.
So then you went and straight away opened up another practice in Cape Town.
Yes, I did. Because again, there wasn't a practice that I could join, and I was pregnant at the time, moving back. So it isn't that easy to convince people that you know what you're doing with a big belly sticking out in front. So for me, the easiest was I would start my own practice and follow my own hours, and from there on.
Now, one of the things, a lot of the members of Untitled always ask me, they question whether they want to go into have their own practice or actually be employed. And, my situation is very similar to yours in that I didn't really have a choice. I had to start my own practice. There was nowhere to be employed. But now it's a lot more mainstream, the field, and people do have a choice. They potentially could they could be employed, or they could open their practice. Did you always want to have a practice, or what do you think the difference between owning a practice and being employed is?
I think initially I definitely wanted a practice because I wanted to decide how and what I do and when I do it. So that was my biggest motivation, was I wanted to decide my hours, who I see, who I don't see. Being older and wiser, I would say now I would actually prefer working for someone. But it depends who that someone will be. And the reason is that when you actually run a practice, before you realize it, you're actually working physically less, but managing and doing the admin, which is never why I got into this field to start with. I love the practical side. I love being out. So it's fine if that is the line that you appreciate or what you find stimulating is running a practice. For me, that was never the case. So, I mean, I have a lovely practice and two great therapists, physios working for me and with me, but the admin hours is getting more and more and more for me to manage it. And you'd think financially you're doing really well because you have a practice and you have people working for you and you get a percentage of their income. But in the end, you actually, if I look at it, I think I'll do better if I just work for someone and just get paid my commission or however you structure it, and close the doors at the end of the day. Because if you run your practice and it shows you have your own company, the doors never close. In terms of emails coming through or making payments or checking something or something has to be ordered. So I think at this stage I would actually appreciate working for someone as long as I like that person and I can still do my own things. So it's a little bit of a toss-up between having the freedom to make decisions and
I think sometimes, exactly. I mean, I was exactly like you. I also wanted to choose who I saw and my hours, and I think it's often the type of personalities that get into the veterinary professional field. We're sort of that A-type, controlling type of personality. I don't know if you'd see yourself as that.
No, I'm actually not that controlling. I think I just like to, and I guess that's why I don't necessarily want to run my own practice, because I'm not that controlling. I don't think I'm the best boss in terms of setting very strict rules. So if you work for me, everyone knows that, or the few who has worked and work for me now, they're not left on their own devices. I'm always there for support or work-related things, but I don't set very strict rules in terms of
touch
not who they see. They can actually decide who they see. They run their own schedule, which is how I would have liked when I was a new qualified to be able to do that. So they set their own schedules. If they want to ride horses, they do it themselves. I don't run their diaries, and I also don't tell them how many days they need to work. So I give them that flexibility because I think I would have liked that. So if I have a choice now and I can have someone that gives me that flexibility to run my own diary, I probably would work for someone.
I think there's quite a lot of trust in that. So trust from your side.
Yes, definitely. And that's maybe where I am a little bit naive still. But I have a philosophy: until you prove me wrong, I don't double check, and I believe in the honesty of my therapist. So, but if you prove me wrong, then obviously there's going to be a problem. But for me, it works.
So how does it work? I mean, I have a lot of Onlinepethealth members who are by themselves and are thinking of expanding. So how do you set up your commission-based structure with your therapist?
Again, there I go to my own experience, and I know also when you work and start working, actually not just starting, throughout your career, financially it is difficult to get ahead because we can only charge so much in South Africa. We travel out, our overheads in terms of traveling out, especially with the equine work, to the farms and to the yards are high. So I guess in my practice, I've always put my therapist work on a commission base, but I've put the commission quite high. So first of all, I want to keep them because I've trained them all, and they're worth a lot to me in my practice. So for me, I want to encourage for them to find their own clients, new clients to bring to the practice. So they tend to work on a slightly lesser percentage when they see my clients that's been at my practice, and then a higher percentage when they actually bring their own clients that to the practice that they've went out to, I don't know what do you forage clients, or you go and see them, or whatever the term might be.
Yes.
So for me, it's an incentive, and I must say most of my therapists do stay because it's financially worth it for them, and it seems to work. But I'm sure it won't work for everybody. Some people have. Yeah.
And so they don't have a basic. They just
they don't have a basic,
structure.
Purely commission. But I do refer to, I help them in all my capacity to get clients as well. Yeah. So to fill up their what would you call it, their work schedule as soon as possible if someone new starts. But I must say we've been lucky. Both the physios who work for me, their days are really full.
So there are 3 of you, and do you have a base?
Yeah, well, basically the base is my house, which has an office. So there's 3 of us working. I only work part-time because I've got 3 kids and a husband and dogs and cats and things. And also, my office, I have an accountant in the office, and the same person, the office lady, she does all the invoicing. They do their own bookings, but they send through a patient sheet at the end of each week. So we as practice are responsible for doing all the invoicing, and then they get paid once a month on a certain day, and they don't have to worry about getting invoices checked or paid, or they just purely have to do the work.
That's all the stuff that you don't like to do.
That's exactly all the stuff I don't like to do. So I want to go back to being that one who just goes out, put my hands on
You want to work for yourself.
Yes, my hands on the horses and the dogs, and then someone else worries about the invoicing and getting the money in and all those things.
And you obviously have a website, and do you do marketing for the practice? So is that your responsibility, or they're responsible to do?
Because we're small, we've actually shared it. It just depends how tech savvy you are. So I've got one therapist that is very tech savvy, and the other one is slightly less. I'm not naming any names. So we kind of try and share it. Yeah. And also who has time.
Yes.
I must say, because I'm not a millennial, I've been neglecting that side, and also because for a long time I was by myself, so I was full, so I didn't see the need to advertise because I can't do the work anyway. I don't have time for extra work, but obviously if you have more therapists in, you do need to. So now we're sharing it. So
and what about referrals? Do you get quite a lot of referrals?
We do get referrals. We've got vets in. I'm based in Cape Town, obviously, so we have vets that we work with regularly. So those do refer a lot, and then obviously there's the word of mouth between clients. You get to one yard, you see 1 or 2 horses, people are happy with the service, and they refer you on to the rest of the yard. So I would probably say maybe about 60%. Client referrals, 40% if I have to make a guess, vet referrals.
And your small animal clients now, you're obviously not seeing them at the office at home.
No, I don't have a base.
You guys are mobile, all of you. You travel to people's houses, to other vet practices, to even see the small animal patients.
All is mobile.
Yeah. And do you have any association, or do you collaborate with any of the other small animal practices where you actually go into a practice and consult from there, or they just call you as and when needed?
They just call us at the moment as and when needed. Okay. I think my equine side just grew really quickly when I arrived in South Africa. So a big part of our practice was more equine based, but now my new therapist that started about I think over a year ago, she's building on our canine side.
Okay.
But I think at the moment she's traveling out to vets practices and owners.
Yeah.
Homes.
So you and I remember used to work together when I did acupuncture. Yes. We worked really well together.
Yeah.
Would refer to one another.
And that's the great thing. If I want to decide I want to work with a vet or with a different profession and collaborate, I don't want a boss telling me I'm allowed to or not allowed to do that. And I think that was one of the reasons I wanted to work for myself, so that I could make those decisions about who I collaborate with, which in my case is anybody who I think knows what they're doing. I'm happy to work with. So
Do you remember treating the puma at Holistic Vet?
Yes, from the, the zoo in... It came from a zoo in Joburg.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember? They brought it down.
Yes,
and
it was
the Animal Planet came and they were filming
9-month-old.
They said it had cerebral palsy.
Cerebral palsy. It was. Yeah. I think it was born, but the mom didn't open up the birth sac around the.
You got a good memory. I don't remember.
I remember. So it had. Yeah. Anyway, so it had oxygen deprivation at birth. So it was slightly ataxic, but slightly couldn't jump properly. So when it jumped, it fell over backwards.
I've still got some pictures.
Yes, I actually want those pictures.
Yeah,
I would love to, because it was the most interesting case.
Yeah,
I mean, I love treating those.
So I got this call to say that they want to bring this puma in to see me, and we didn't learn anything in veterinary school about cerebral palsy. So I phoned
that
Christelle.
was from my human side,
Yes.
the cerebral palsy, but also from a veterinary veterinary point of view, we did a little bit of cats, but also not that much. So it was a very unique.
Yeah, I phoned you. I said, listen, this is for you. You have to come and help me with this.
I must say I loved that case. And I think what I learned a lot about, because at one stage, obviously with the filming and the lighting and things, the puma got slightly distressed.
Yes.
And it had taken hold of my upper arm between its teeth in its mouth, and it didn't break the skin. It was just holding, and no one else noticed because we were all kind of busy.
Yeah.
And
after
not worried. After a little while, I just tapped the handler of the zoo on the shoulder, and I said, could you maybe just get her off my arm? And when it took about a day, but the bruise, she didn't break the skin, so it was purely her jaw, and that was 9 months old.
Yeah.
So her jaw pressure was so much that I had the size of an apple shaped blue-green, the whole works, a bruise on my arm, and it just shows you the muscular strength that that they have.
You and did well, because I don't remember.
Well, they were filming. I know. Swear and shout and cry. But it just shows you, and also working as physios or vets with non-domestic animals, you have to take more things in account.
Yes, yeah. So let's chat a little bit, just change course a little bit, chat about equipment. So that's one of the things that I think people that are starting practices are a little bit scared of doing, investing in equipment. Have you made any big investments in equipment, or have you just sort of slowly built up equipment and bought as you've had money, or did you get loans? Or
I would say, coming from also human physio and a manual therapy side, my biggest equipment that I actually like using is my hands. So initially, I didn't have money to acquire equipment, obviously, when I started the practice. So I was very effective purely using my hands, manual therapy. Then as time went on, I did buy. I think I had a portable ultrasound that I used for swelling and things like that. And we have a laser in the practice that I actually don't use. It travels with one of my therapists. So I'm just not a huge fan of machines. So for me, it's purely, but it was a thing that I couldn't afford it when I started the practice. And as money came in, and I had to save up. But it's difficult to actually get enough saved in a small practice to afford. Some of the electrotherapy machines are very expensive.
Yeah. I think, you can get loans for it.
Yes, you can. I just never wanted to get a loan. I think for me, I was being so effective with my manual techniques and rehab and exercise techniques I was using that it was just me. I didn't feel I wanted to I didn't need it enough. And I think the problem with our, maybe other practices run differently, but the vets charge for doing an x-ray or doing a scan, but we don't do that. We go out and do a treatment for an hour or 45 minutes. It doesn't matter if I use my hands or a laser or ultrasound. I don't charge any different.
Yes.
So there's not a big way to actually make that money back.
The return on investment for you wasn't really worth it, because your hands were doing the job well enough.
I was effective and more inclined to use my hands anyway. So that was just my approach.
So what are your biggest challenges, would you find, in practice?
I think my biggest challenge was probably finding people that I wanted to employ or join me in my practice that was like-minded in thinking as myself. It's not easy. I wouldn't say being in charge of therapists, but also being able to share approaches to things or experiences or what works and what doesn't work. So finding someone that fits into your type of practice, I think, is a challenge.
Yeah, one of the things that I teach my members is to actually look at their core values. So, and it's one thing that I never really did in practice in the beginning, but later on I did. And I used to think it was quite a corporate thing, mission statements and core values. But actually sitting down and working out what your core values are, then you very quickly realize whether somebody that you interview fits in with your practice or not.
Yes,
and until you actually do that and sit down, like the type of how you want to practice. So those are some of the...
And also how and what type of clientele you have.
Yes.
Because you can have and I've experienced that you can have a therapist that is skillful in a practice, but personality-wise, your client just does not, the term probably gel with them is the layman's term to use. And then it doesn't matter how good they are.
Yes. They have to have those communication
so I think, I don't know, maybe I've never worked in Joburg, but maybe Joburg, the physios can maybe say, but maybe Joburg clients are different than Cape Townian clients. It's maybe a little bit more laid back, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or from London to here. So, that's why I think if you know your clientele or where you're based, also helps, I guess, to see if someone's going to fit in. And then the other challenge was juggling between family and your practice. I mean, you have the same problem, I'm sure. And I'm not the most organized person. I'm slightly attention, what's the word, deficit. So having 3 kids and dogs and husband and then the practice on the other side, then, that's a challenge for me personally.
Yes.
To make time for everything.
Yeah. And that's why you've chosen to work part-time.
Yes.
Yeah. And you're always doing sports things.
I am.
Yeah.
I think
so you juggle. You're juggling things, but you seem to be. You've got balance.
Yeah, I make time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've decided I needed to make time for me outside of my practice.
Yes.
So I mean, I love my physical work, the actual treating of the horses and the dogs and assessments and that. But for me to get a break from everything, sport and keeping fit. I mean, our job is very physical, so I'm actually fitter and more equipped now than I guess I was in my 30s to work, physically work, and have the stamina.
Because you always know when you've had a holiday and then you come back, that very first day is exhausting, isn't it?
Exactly, because it's completely different.
Exactly. Yeah. Christelle, it's been so lovely chatting to you. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your
pleasure.
Conference lunch to do the recording. Looking forward to maybe we'll have you on the podcast again sometime soon.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christelle. Have a great conference.
For more information on continuing education opportunities for veterinary rehabilitation therapists, please go to www.onlinepethealthwebinar.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to my podcast so you don't miss out. I'm Dr. Megan Kelly on the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast. Bye for now.